moving on, Wonders of Spiritual Unfoldment with John Butler. And we're moving on to chapter 2, John.
Good. I'm
First,
ready.
intimations.
Uh-huh.
I read the chapter and I highlighted quite a few things. And the first thing that stands out is on page 12, first paragraph. And you wrote, I long to have something to work at that I could believe in.
Yes.
And then goes on, life pressured me to settle, start a family, and be responsible. But I felt at odds with the world. I tasted the sweet fruits of freedom. So I was wondering, can you talk a little bit about what sweet fruits of freedom means to you?
I can't remember exactly when I wrote those. Well, I know when I wrote
1963.
Ah, yes. Well, I'd already been around the world. I'd already fulfilled my long-held dream to be a cowboy in the outback. It wasn't in Texas, it was in Australia, but it was horses all from dawn to dusk in those days. No machines, and the voyage out there was, of course, by sea. People didn't fly then, and this wonderful sea voyage took me 6 weeks to go out there, and over 2 months coming back through the South Sea Islands. Oh yes, that opened my horizons a bit. I remember I longed to see the world before men had messed it up. And on a certain hill in Australia, I climbed up a hill and looked all around me and could see no sign that man had ever set foot anywhere at all. I thought that was it. Actually, it was surprising. It was rather cold then, and I was in bare feet and bare legs and a bit nervous of snakes. So, but yes, I've seen some big spaces in my time. 63. Had I been to South America? I'm not sure. Anyway, it wasn't the end of my adventures, because I've been in many wonderful mountain, wide open and other wide open spaces, both before and since. Of course, I live in a lovely part of England, surrounded by wide open spaces of the hills of northern England, where I've always loved to be. I tasted the sweet fruits of freedom. You better read that bit again, dear. How does it go on?
You wrote, I long to have something to work that I could believe in.
Ah, yes. Exactly. Well, how could I possibly settle down and sit behind a desk after that? Just wasn't possible, was it? Anyway, I got into farming and always was working in the open fields. I never liked machinery. Loved the stars. Yes, I've always been outside. What work could I possibly find? All the work that the world offered was somehow fenced in. I searched long. Well, farming really was the answer. That was what I loved most. That gave me as close as I could get to the freedom I longed for. I loved sheep. Sheep always gave me that sense of the sheep usually are in wide open fields, plenty of space around them, quiet. Yes, I did struggle. I've always struggled to find my place with the world. And now, thank God, when I got into meditation when I was 27, that opened up the inner spirit, the inner space, the inner wide open space. And that was a very big realization for me. That gave me a purpose, something that I could believe in, the freedom that I found within myself. But of course, like everybody, I then had to contend with a half a lifetime's conditioning to be fenced in within the norms of society. And I kicked against that very much. I just couldn't seem to fit anywhere in this world. Didn't belong here. I knew instinctively I didn't belong, but it's not so easy to know where we do belong. Look for it in love and love and love and love. But very often that wasn't as liberating as one hoped for. It often became a even more imprisoning. Not always as simple as you think, is it? Once you go down that road, how can we avoid it?
John, when I keep coming back to this word freedom, because I think most of us on a spiritual path, we want this thing, freedom, that in my case, I don't even really know what that means.
No, exactly. No, we don't. Well, like all things in spirit, you see, we start off with probably quite a childish concept of freedom. We want to go on holiday, for example, and you go and dine a beach somewhere, but the trouble is there are always other people there, aren't there? Or you think, you meet something or someone is freedom, you think it's a sort of freedom to turn from your daily chores to look at a video or something, or go out. You think that's freedom. Well, within limits it is, but if you've really got a strong appetite for freedom, the more you go into it, the more it expands. The horizon is always ever going beyond, isn't it? You say you do. It's like looking for the rainbow, isn't it? If ever you find the rainbow, it always keeps moving away, doesn't it? Or looking at a mirage in the desert, it keeps going further on. Or you climb up the highest mountain in the world, and then you find there are more mountains. There are always more and more of them. There's no end to it. And of course, in freedom, the spiritual freedom, you get a little taste of it, but it never ends. It's like going up into the sky. If you could go up into the sky, where does the sky end? Or the stars end? You get up to the moon, or and what's beyond the moon? It just goes on, doesn't it? More and more stars. So it is with freedom, and this is really the nature of God, at least in my understanding. There's no end to it. And also, of course, with love, because love just gets bigger and bigger and bigger without end. All the real things of life, freedom, life itself, L with a capital L, it certainly doesn't end, I assure you. I know only too well my life's only just beginning. Here am I, sit an old man. It's not the end of my life. I'm just a little boy venturing into the next stage now. There's no end to it. So that's freedom. We go as far as we can, and that's what we do. But it draws us ever on. God calls us. The adventure, that's what I like. The adventure never ends. That's what I should have called this book that you're reading now. But the publisher didn't like that title. I thought it was a good one to call it The Adventure Without End. So we had to come up with something else. But I thought it was a good title. Adventure Without End.
John, would you say, or how would you describe as our consciousness evolves? Does that expand our sense of freedom? Is that connected?
Yes, of course it does. Absolutely it does. Because consciousness is all these things. They're all really synonymous. You can't really define what freedom is or love is, or consciousness or spirit is, because they're all really melt into one. They're all really the same thing. It's only as they sort of get precipitated and crystallized into what we call worldly form that they seem to be something different. But as you go up the pyramid, all these things merge into what in spiritual language is called unity or oneness, and then well, that's just what happens. They all merge into what's beyond really description, and then words fail, and the only thing that carries you forward is what's called faith, which is higher knowledge, really. But nobody knows quite what it is, because of course it's beyond description. But it's the most real of anything. And then you see that what we call knowledge is actually ignorance, is spiritual ignorance or spiritual limitation.
So if you think back when you had this faith or this inner drive for freedom, what did that feel like? That might sound like a naive question.
Oh, but like this, I must get out. It's frustration. This and tending to get irritated, with human expectations, and oh, I can't. I just let me get out. And so I just burst out, and I got up the hill here. This was my usual escape. Then we got a lovely hill where I used to live, and not quite a mountain, but it's pretty good for England. And I go up there. I usually feel better. And then I had many adventures. I've traveled a lot. I went off to South America, and I've been in Africa. I've been lots of places.
So you write on the same page 12, for those of you that are following along in the book. You write, but what was I searching for? To myself, I answered God. So here is that connection, God and freedom. It's this word, right? That talk to us about God, John.
I don't know. I may have thought as a young man I knew what it was. Now I'm an old man. I don't know at all. I don't think anybody knows what God is. It's just a word, isn't it, that we use to describe what we don't really know. It's the you can sort of make one attempt to describe it, which I like very much, is absolute simplicity. Yes, I like that. Absolute simplicity. And actually now I've had much spiritual practice, and in particular practice in just being present, here now, present, and still, silent, and feeling this ever presence. Indescribable, and yet the most obvious of the obvious. Once you get it, I really don't know where that ends and God begins. Maybe that is God. But I'll let other people decide that one. I'll leave it as an open question, because this presence, you see, that is obviously here and now, and even if you and I were 1,000,000 miles apart, it contains us both, doesn't it? We're both in it simultaneously. The whole world is in it, isn't it? Once you get it, it's just as plain as a pikestaff, isn't it? So the old song goes, God holds the whole world in his hand, and he does. It's just like this. So isn't that perhaps what we're talking about? And even though it's here and now within the confines of this room, it passes through the walls with no trouble at all. It knows no boundary. It fills the valley, goes over the oceans all the way to Australia. It contains the stars. There's nothing that isn't contained in it. All our human follies are contained. And isn't it love? Doesn't it love anything, everything, without conditions? And isn't it perfect freedom? And isn't it life? Eternal life, beyond space and time. And within it, aren't all things perfect? So maybe that's God.
So I wrote some of this down, John. So through the stillness, would that be the teaching, like learning?
It's a very simple and practical way of approaching it, isn't it? It seems to work. It has a quite fine stillness and just let it expand, and lo and behold, you come to this that we're talking about.
I have to ask a question.
Yes,
So
you do.
for myself, which maybe will help others. So as we sit, meditate, feet on the ground, and the body, the mind, it wants to be everything but still.
Yes.
What is the work in that moment?
Well, I think once you taste freedom, you just lose your taste for anything else. You just get bored with thinking, I suppose. I think that's what's happened to me. Yes, you just get bored with it. You found something better. Yes, that's quite a good answer. It's by finding something that's better, you see, that you leave behind what was less satisfactory. So it's such a natural process, this finding spirit. Of course, there again, it's easy for me to talk now. I've had a lot of experience, and it is simple for me now, but it wasn't as a young man. I didn't have the breadth of vision, I suppose, when I was younger. I think that comes with age and experience. As a young man, I longed for the wide open spaces of this world. I remember how homesick I was for the Australian bush when I was in my 20s, and then later on it was various deserts in Africa, the mountains, the great places I'd been. But now I'm not homesick for anything, dear, because I find it here and now within myself. I don't really need to go anywhere from where I am now. Extraordinary, isn't it? Yes, you don't lose anything really in this world because you find it ever more in spirit. Yes, that's one of the extraordinary things that life teaches us. Why perhaps we have to lose the things we love in order to find them in spirit. Otherwise, we'd always find ourselves living within something that isn't actually big enough. Even the biggest wonders of this world are not ultimately big enough.
On page 17 in chapter 2, you write, the only movement is to or from God.
Yes. Yes, that's correct, isn't it? I remember being told that once. I studied, for many years I attended a school of meditation. I remember once being told that there are only two directions in life, or in fact only two choices that we have in life, towards God or away from God. Of course, what is God? But I suppose as far as one has some idea of that. It's absolutely right, isn't it? At any moment, any time in our life, we have only one real choice, to be towards God or away from God. Towards God is always in the present moment, feet on the ground, and you find this infinite presence. Away from God is to lose it. And then we get into what is commonly known as, in terms of mental agitation, thought, doubt, questioning, that sort of thing, here, there, and everywhere. God, as Scripture says, is ever present, an ever present help. We can never be closer to God than here and now.
That's a big one, John.
It is a big one. Not everybody will agree.
You continue on the same page how comparatively easy it is to know something intellectually. I mean, we're talking. And then you write, to repeat, believe, and even teach it, and yet remain another world away from practical realization.
That's the world, isn't it? The world full of people who know things that teach others. And really, I wouldn't hardly know what I'm talking about. What it is to be quiet, what it is to be silent and feel the higher knowledge of silence, the all-sufficiency of silence. Yes, intellectual knowledge. There's another phrase from the Bible which I love very much. The wisdom of man is foolishness to God. Amen to that.
On the bottom of that page, this is really stands out to me. I can very much relate, but I still felt myself as an individual doer, especially when confronted by tragedy and indeed the whole dilemma of human existence, and I worried much about my duty in the world. I think that's most of us, John. What do we do?
Of course. Well, what have I done, dear? Just muddle on. Muddle on. I don't think any of us have much clue what to do. Fortunately, things tend to happen, don't they? You meet someone or something happens, and how does life move on? Do we really know? Do our plans come to anything much? Some people think they can plan their lives. I'm not sure that I ever knew. I look back at quite extraordinary things that happened to me. I never dreamed this would happen. You know, we think we're settled and married or something, and then it all falls apart, or you think you're forever alone, and then you meet someone, and oh, you never know what's around the corner, do we? But oh God, yes. Especially when I was young, I was tormented. What on earth's my duty? What am I meant to be doing? And all the answers the world provided didn't satisfy me. I didn't know what to do with myself. I felt all my contemporaries were making success of their lives and settling down and finding good jobs and raising families, and I didn't. I just seemed to be cast out on the fringe of nowhere, not succeeding at anything very much. Extraordinary. So now I say to young people who come to me, join the great company of misfits and failures, my dears. You might end up in the right place after all.
Would you say that you had a knowing early on in life that the world is the way we see it, and that we get stuck in is not where you're going to find your freedom?
I can't say if I did, there were moments. It certainly wasn't consistent. I didn't really know what I was looking for, really. I didn't. I don't think I could have formulated it years ago, not as I do now. Words seem to come to me quite easily now, but they couldn't when I was younger. I didn't know, dear. It was, people talk of being lost souls, don't they? They don't know where they're going. Jesus calls us lost sheep, doesn't he? Just lost. People, I think, I can seem to remember one or two older people said, you'll find yourself one day, you'll find your way, but I didn't know what they meant. I was never interested in finding myself. I thought that was selfishness. I do remember when I was 26, I just come back from, where had I gone to? Because I'd been to South America, trying to make the world a better place. I came back from there and looked for someone to teach me to meditate, and they asked a very interesting question. They said, what do you really want in life? And I said, God. I think the man who's interviewing me was quite surprised. I don't think many people came out with that ready answer. I wasn't sure what I meant myself by it, but something said it. I suppose you could say that's still the same answer. Somebody said, I said, a little bit later on, another old wise man said, well, you should join the church then. But that didn't work for me either. So I ended up as usual, ended up alone, not belonging anywhere in this world. I still don't belong really in this world. But I suppose the comfort of getting older is that you find comfort in this infinite not knowing. It's so much more comfortable not knowing now than knowing. I don't really like if ever my voice says, I know, I distrust it, or I think, I don't believe it. I really only feel safe not knowing.
On page 18, ties into this, John. You write, and so allowing the will of God to flow, and I saw that there is no value apart from God. So the value of our work and actions is solely determined by the amount of God we allow to pass into them.
Yes, I remember that day. I was farming then. God, I think I remember writing that. Yes, I remember I really started to farm. I'd been working out in the fields, and what was I doing? Probably had a fork or spade in my hand. I did think about things. Yes, I did. The only value in our work is God. Yes, God flowing into it. And that was when the secret of organic farming began to sink into me, because I realized that was what the early pioneers of the organic movement called the life force. This is what really animated things, not only you and me, but the earth itself. And there was all the difference in the world between what was a living soil, in other words, a soil that was full of the movement of little bugs and worms and all sorts of things we couldn't see, but you could feel in your hands was alive. You could almost walk off your hands. The soil was so alive. And in contrast, a soil that doesn't have that life force or that same strength of life. And it was this life force that really really invigorated what was grown on that land, and therefore the people that consumed that produce. And now I call it God, and it's exactly the same thing. You know, somebody gave me a beautifully knitted, hand-knitten garment a little while ago, and it's ages since anybody had given me a hand-knitted garment with that quality. And immediately it just is, it's in another dimension altogether from some manufactured article, isn't it? Because that God quality, the love she put into it through her hands, they've just given it life. And so I put it on my head and it made me alive. It's a gift of God, isn't it? So simple. And it's such a secret to life. Yes, to work for love or with that God quality.
John, I have a feeling you're going to get a lot of hand knitted sweaters in the mail now.
I don't mind. I've still got a drawer full of woolies that my mother knitted. They all want mending, I'm afraid. I'm not very, I used to try, well, I did. In the army taught me to mend my own socks. I did. I was quite good at one time. I can do it, but my hands wobble a bit now. They're not so good. I don't see so well.
So would you say, just to clarify, where you write the value of our work and actions is solely determined by the amount of God we allow to pass into them. So it's, again, if I'm hearing you correctly, being still and being present with the work we're doing, whatever it is.
Well, some people will interpret that as saying, if you're still while you're doing work, you're not doing any work. But of course, the stillness is really the all-encasing presence. You see, I can be in stillness. I can still wave my hands and talk, can't I? And yet the stillness that fills this room is there. So like sort of, if I had a third hand, I'd be holding onto it with my inner hand. So I'm always connected with this ever present, and I can run and jump around and make a noise without disturbing it. It's really what in sort of religious talk is the third point. It's the Trinity. And when this third point, which is the presence of God, is present, you see, then life is lifted to a higher dimension. then our work is sanctified. I'm quite impressed having you read out these things. I wrote them a long, long time ago. It's
I'm jumping way ahead, but this really ties into beautifully with what you just said. The last sentence actually in this chapter, the silent stillness always there, but I was turned away and had forgotten it. Forgive me, Lord.
Oh, I remember that. I can quote the beginning of that paragraph. Again, I was in my field and I saw a plough, didn't I, in the next field, and a sparrow picking the last fruits off an elder tree. Yes, I remember that. I had been turned away and had forgiven it. I had forgotten it. Forgive me, Lord. Yes, this is the sin. This is what we do. This is what's called sin. Sin is simply turning away from this presence of God. This forgetfulness, really. We all do it all the time. We just forget. And this is why the work, what I call now the work with a capital W, is by discipline, by practice, by whatever means possible, to keep turning back to this presence. I remember I had remind me notices all over where I lived then, in the bathroom, everywhere, in the kitchen, on the table, in my bed, little cards. Well, this one says Zoom, because I mustn't forget a Zoom thing this evening. But, remember, I can't remember what I wrote, but just to jog my memory. So I in between, my periods of forgetfulness, I keep remembering to hold the tool in my hand, to watch what I was doing, to feel the pressure of the soil, to feel the muscles working, to look around me, be aware of this all-containing presence. Yes. And then marvelous, I see simple thing like a plow or sparrow, and see they just become perfect. They become heavenly. Heavenly. It brings me to tears. Just melts your heart. And although in one sense I was desperately lonely and lost, in another sense I was held in the everlasting arms. And then I'd fall back again into poor me. And that's how it is, up and down, my dears, up and down.
That gives me a lot of peace hearing you say that. That's really quite normal.
Thank God. Thank God.